Good evening. Welcome to the webinar presentation on the new position, the Unit Religious Emblems Coordinator. This is only the second time we've offered this training, so welcome. We're glad that you've joined us tonight. My name is Deb Hazelwood. I'm hosting this session. Before we begin, just a quick reminder of what you're seeing on the screen. If you look at the slide, you have the attendee viewer window. This is where you're going to see the PowerPoint presentation. You also have the attendee control panel. So we're going to zoom in on that. When you're looking at your control panel, the first thing we want to highlight is the question box. This is where you're going to type your questions and you're going to submit them. And you can submit your questions throughout the entire presentation. But we will have the question answer session at the end, and we will read your questions and answer them at that time. And then the second thing we want to highlight are the two buttons that are jutting out from the edge of the control panel. The orange button is what will hide that panel and make it reappear again. And then the second button is how you can maximize the viewer window to fill your computer screen. So use these buttons to adjust your viewing window, and let's begin. It is my pleasure to introduce Chip Turner, who will be our presenter this evening. Chip is a key member of the P.R.A.Y staff. He is the Director of Communication and Training. And in this role, he has done tremendous work in supporting the new Religious Emblems Coordinator positions. And on the volunteer side, Chip serves as the chair of the National Religious Relationships of the Boy Scouts of America. And so Chip has a wealth of knowledge. I'm sure he's eager to get going. So Chip, thanks for your presentation tonight, and take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Deb. It is a pleasure, and I want to add my welcome and thank Deb for helping facilitate this. And it's always great to hear from her as one of the persons who is very experienced in not only leading religious emblems classes, but even helping write some of the materials. So thanks very much.
Thanks.
Well, you are very welcome. If you are sitting out there this evening and saying, well, I'm a religious emblems coordinator, but now what in the world do I do? We hope we can answer that question for you. First of all, I would like to say congratulations and thank you, because you've been willing to be a pioneer in implementation of a very important responsibility. And even beyond that, we want to welcome you to the Religious Emblems Coordinator team. Now that if you are serving in that role, or perhaps you're looking for someone to serve in that role, that will complete the process, because there are specific responsibilities and guidelines at the council, district, and unit level. So we've talked in some of the earlier webinars about the other positions, although we will review them briefly and see how they fit together. But our main focus tonight is the Unit Religious Emblems Coordinator. Well, where do we begin? I would say the Scout motto is a great way to start our journey, because we need to be prepared. I would suggest to you there are at least a couple of ways of approaching this subject. One would be to talk about the resources, and another would be to understand the responsibilities. And while logic might tell me that to know the responsibilities would come first, I simply wanted to highlight understanding the responsibilities after we show you how many tremendous resources are already available to you. And I would also remind you that as you take notes this evening, that we also have this presentation on the website at praypub.org, and we'll show that to you and talk about that more later. So you certainly encouraged to make notes, but don't feel like you have to get every single word down. And then the third part of being prepared is to develop a plan of action. And though each one of these plans will be different for the units that you serve, we do want to give you some general guidelines. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, where shall we begin? Knowing the resources or understanding the responsibilities? Well, as I've already told you, I believe that it would be comforting, at least I hope so, for you to see a sizable number of resources, because I think they also help to explain what the role is all about. So knowing your resources. This is a very long web address here, and I said don't necessarily worry about that. You can get it off of our website later in the process. But it is called scouting.org/scoutsource/awards/religious awards. And on that page, you will find a wealth of information. Perhaps you've already visited there. And I will be reading a few lists tonight. Not that I don't think you can read, but I want to underscore the importance of a few things, and then you can go back and digest it. So let's look at that page. The page, and I've listed the web address at the top again if you do want to write it down. But there are many things to be found on this rich resource at scouting.org. And the first one is a clickable chart, a religious emblems clickable chart. And if you click on that, the first one happens to be African Methodist Episcopal Church. But as you can see there on that site, by clicking in the appropriate location, you can find about religious emblems of every single category that are available to members of the Boy Scouts of America. I say this to you and want to spend a moment or two on this because regardless of your faith background, we don't expect you to know the requirements and all the ins and outs of every single religious emblem. That's really not your responsibility. You have an extremely important responsibility to guide people to the resources, but that's why I'm showing you the resources first of all. So there's a clickable chart. Now back to that page, you'll also see there is a Duty to God brochure printable chart. And if you were to click on that, you would come to something that looks exactly like this. Perhaps you've seen this brochure because it has been printed and distributed by the Boy Scouts of America, but it's also on this website. Besides a very attractive cover, you can see the various emblems that are illustrated there, and then the chart shows every one of the awards currently available, alphabetical and by age group. Some groups, some faith groups have an award for every level of scouting, and others do not. Go back to that page for a moment, then we'd have a suggestion on the site, and I would like to take us there for a moment too, about frequently asked questions. Now, I know you can read, and I'm not going to read to you all the content of this, but just to help you know what is on here. The first is what are the religious emblems programs? And there you find a detailed explanation of what that's all about. But then you also see very practical questions to help folks with, like, I have a unit with children of all different faiths. How can I include the religious emblems program for my unit? That's one of the reasons we're so very excited about the position of the Unit Religious Emblems Coordinator, because we do have some units that are chartered by a faith-based organization, that many of the Scouts or Cubs or Venturers are of that particular faith. But almost always there are Scouts of other faiths as well. So you don't have to be an expert on all those different ones. This will simply tell you about the chart and some approaches. Then even the question about, do boys and girls participate in the same program? I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but every religious emblem or every faith group is going to be just a bit different. Some faiths, for instance, Protestant and independent churches use the P.R.A.Y program of religious emblems, and so you can look and see what those are. Sometimes the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Campfire, American Heritage Girls, all use the same program, and sometimes they don't. But you can find that material on the specific site that we'll point you to. And then the youth have to belong to a religious institution. And as you can see there, it says it depends on the religion. All you really have to do is check the eligibility requirements for the particular religious emblem. What if my religious institution, what doesn't my religious institution know about the religious emblems program? Well, maybe a lot. It really depends on how much involvement there has been in the process. But also, as you study that and get comfortable with it, you'll know the answers to those questions. And as I said, you don't have to have at the top of the mind every answer to every question just to know where the resource is. And so the final statement there, or question, if the Religious Emblems program for my faith has more than one level, may my child earn all of these recognitions? Well, you can read the answers to that and many other questions on the frequently asked questions page. I simply point it out to you because I want you to be comfortable in knowing that it's there and it's available to you. So we've got the frequently asked questions, and then we're going back to, well, how do I get started? Very good question. We want you to know that spelled right out there on that page are some specifics, and you can go back to them. But let's look at the general idea, because regardless of the emblem, there are some things that are constant. One of them is that the youth members must obtain the specified or specific booklet for their religion. Sometimes you may find those in the Scout Shop. Others are available online. So each one of the emblems, it'll say on the chart where you get those. So check with the council store, read the chart. And every youth member does need his or her own copy because of all the materials. There are responses that are required and evidence of being involved in the program. So every youth does need a copy of the material. Also be aware that some religions offer adult manuals for counselors and even some for mentors. And those are great resources if they're available. Make sure, as a number 5, that parents review the program guidelines. We don't want any surprises. It's a very inclusive process, and we want the families involved. Then number 6, some programs require participants to be members of the religious institution. That information may be found on the website or certainly the study materials. Many, if not most, do not. However, be aware that this could be a consideration. Number 7, the age and grade requirements vary from program to program. Now, if you are fairly new to the Religious Emblems program, you may be sitting there thinking, well, why do they vary from program to program? Aren't they Boy Scout awards? Well, basically the answer to that is no, they are not. They're faith-based awards. They're written by the various faith groups and are then approved for wear on the Scout uniform. Our Religious Relationships Committee does review every Religious Emblems program, but our concern is primarily that we're adhering to scouting principles, that the emblem that is approved meets the uniforming guidelines for size and appearance and so forth. So the materials are written by the faith groups. So therefore, don't be surprised that every one of them is going to be just a little bit different. It'll have the character, the personality of that faith group. And then number 8, each program sets their own guidelines as to who may serve as a counselor. Sometimes it's clergy, sometimes it's parents, sometimes it's other ministers. So just be familiar with that by reading the materials. Then a 9th consideration is that the family should talk to their religious leaders and show them the booklet before beginning the program. Please note that. Not that anyone is out to get anyone in pursuing the program, but we just don't want any surprises. Make sure everyone is aware of where we're headed from the very beginning. Then number 10, most programs require that they be completed under the auspices of that religious organization, the faith group that is related to that particular emblem. Number 11, many programs require the signature of the local religious leader. In some cases, that religious leader is the person that has to lead the material. In other cases, they simply require a verifying signature at the completion of the program. Number 12, youth members need to complete the requirements, obtain the proper signatures, and follow the instructions for ordering the emblem. 13, these emblems are not available from your local Scout shop. Please be aware of that. The study materials very well may be, many of them are, but the actual emblems are not available for sale in the Scout shop. And then number 14, the emblem should be presented in a meaningful ceremony, preferably in the member's religious institution as well as in the Scout unit. And oftentimes the goal is to have these finished and ready for Scout Sunday or Scout Sabbath. I think we could still do that this year, so that'd be a good goal, although they can be presented at any time. But the bottom line there is make sure that they're presented in the religious institution as well as the Scout unit. Back to our chart for a minute. The Religious Emblems Coordinator video. It says watch the REC video. You can click on it if you're on that page and gain access to it. It is also to be found on the P.R.A.Y website. So there are several ways you can get to it, but by being on this page you can find out more about that, and if you go to that, you click on that, you will get to this PowerPoint. So you press the button and off you go. We're not going to play that tonight, but that is a very, very helpful resource that gives you a quick overview of the whole concept of the Religious Emblems Coordinator. Not necessarily, or and not specifically, the unit Religious Emblems Coordinator, but there are certain characteristics and responsibilities for all three levels, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Finally, it says on this page, additional resources, and one of the ones emphasized is praypub.org/REC. The reason we mention this is because there is a large assembly of resources on that web page that can help you, and the material that is to be found there is not just for the P.R.A.Y religious emblems. Some people do not understand that, but of course there's explanation on certain sections of the website of the P.R.A.Y materials, but this material is for all faith groups. So be familiar with praypub.org/REC. Now, we're still talking about knowing your resources. I've mentioned, we've looked at scouting.org, we've mentioned praypub.org/REC, and I just want to take you for a moment to look at that page to help you realize the kinds of things that are there, so that when you start looking, you'll say, oh, I remember, that's the kind of thing that he talked about. One of the key ones, as you'll see circled in red, is the P.R.A.Y Learning Center. Now, what in the world would you find on the P.R.A.Y Learning Center? Three very important things, and you have probably found those by registering for this webinar. But there are webinars, those that are being done live, such as now, and we're also recording it, so you could be listening to it after the fact here. There are workshop offerings, and there are tutorial videos. So the Learning Center at praypub.org/REC. Then another one that I'd highlight is that there are special bulletins, Boy Scout bulletins that come out sometimes in the form of a newsletter, sometime an email blast type, but you are invited to become involved in that or to receive those. There's no cost, and you can opt in and just as easily opt right back out. But you are invited to participate there. Now, I've circled again the Duty to God Religious Emblems, well, not again, excuse me, there's another, the DVD here, the Duty to God Religious Emblems Resource DVD. Now, what is that? Well, some of you perhaps have seen it. There's a reproduction of the cover in the upper right of the screen. It also is downloadable at the P.R.A.Y site, and then it's also probably available at your Scout office. These and other ways, we want to make it as available as possible, because as you can see the listing on the right, and we're not going to take you through all of these, but there are PowerPoints, there are scripts, there are promotional ideas, there are parent handouts, lots of things, all designed to promoting the use of religious emblems. And that's certainly at the heart of your responsibility. And then at the bottom of that part of the page, you also see you can sign up for email bulletins of various sorts. By looking at this page, you see we're not gathering a lot of information. We just want to know who you are and what your email address is, and optionally what council you're involved in the program with, so we can support you and let you be aware of opportunities that maybe will be even happening in your council or certainly in your area. Also know that there is an REC page on Facebook, and you can find us on Facebook, and on that page there are a number of things that we try to make known, information about upcoming webinars and developments in religious emblems. When the very first council and district religious emblems coordinator patches were available, we had drawings of those. So this might be a site that you'd want to visit on occasion on the REC website on Facebook. And then I'd also point out on Facebook that many, if not most, of the Scouter associations have a page there also. So if you want to know more about what's going on in one of these faith groups, or maybe they even are posting additional information about their religious emblems, they are right there for you on Facebook. So that's just another resource. And the point being, as I mentioned earlier to you, we want you to know that if you have a question, we probably have an answer already prepared for you on one of these sites. Still on the REC site, you'll see also Religious Emblems Retreat Guide and some sample schedules there. Here I've amassed on one page just some little tidbits from that guide. You can see there's sample patches. There's a little bit about ABCs of conducting a religious emblems retreat. Some pictures, one of the pictures there featuring particularly Cub Scouts and American Heritage Girls, it looks like. So, and so there are a variety of ways of doing religious emblems retreats and camps. And that is a resource you can find up in the upper right. You see one that's targeted to older scouts and adventurers in one particular setting. Sometimes those are done by the Religious Relationships Committee in the council or the district, sometimes by an individual congregation or a faith group committee. So there are many ways of doing that. I'd also like you to know that we have just about to schedule one entire webinar on planning and conducting duty to God encampments, and that will be coming in January. If you've never done one, or even if you've done one and would like to compare notes and ask questions, John Lyon, who John has appeared on one of our earlier webinars, he is the Council Religious Emblems Coordinator in Atlanta, Georgia. Just last weekend they had their Duty to God encampment. They've done that for many years, learned a lot of valuable lessons, and I was involved a time or two in some religious emblems retreats, and I wish I had the wisdom that John could pass on. I would have not had to make a couple of mistakes that I made. All right, now let's move on along here and see, still on that page, be aware that this Duty to God encampment webinar is going to be in January, the week of January the 14th. So check the website and we'll have all that information up very, very soon. Then moving down toward the bottom, you see Duty to God promotion resources, scripts, venturing presentations, roundtable orientations, powwow presentations. There are PowerPoints involved in this. There are some printed materials you can simply download. I hope that the point being made that there are many, many resources. You can see there are some PowerPoints and even some listings for unit leaders and scouts and parents. We want to equip you for this job. I also hope you are aware of the Duty to God patch program. I can't think of a better way to kick off an emphasis on religious emblems than utilizing the Duty to God patch. This is made available by P.R.A.Y, but it is for any religious grouping as they're pursuing a religious emblem. Kids love patches. I was about to joke and say I've heard that adults love patches, but of course I'd have to admit that I do too. But this program is a very simple one, the idea being that if a young person will hear a presentation on religious emblems and make a commitment to do their duty to God, to pursue their emblem, that they can receive that patch right on the spot. And over the course of 4 years, they can get all 4 segments to have a larger patch. Those are available on the praypub.org site. And as I said, they are available for use in any religious emblems program. The great thing about it, since this is not a religious emblem, this is just a promotion of the religious emblems program. You can even order those in advance, have them stockpiled so that when you make the presentation, the kids and the parents can have that instant recognition, receive that patch right on the spot, and hopefully then remind the young people of the idea that they can pursue the religious emblem, and that patch will help them remember to do that. That patch design, by the way, is also available on a Religious Emblems Coordinator T-shirt that is made available on the P.R.A.Y site. So if you're interested in one of those, it says Religious Emblems Coordinator on one side, and then has a reproduction of these 4 patches. That is a great tool. I encourage you to use it. We had a very resourceful camp chaplain in Indiana that shared with me recently a program where he prepared a little devotional idea and some other things each day of summer camp to conclusion of the week, the kids had learned about the religious emblem, and they were able then to get that patch. So be aware of that. That's a tool that is available to you. It's easy to handle, they're inexpensive, and it's just a nice way to move forward in a hurry and get the kids involved. So that's the Duty to God promotion patch. Now, I also want to mention to you that there are faith-specific websites, just like there are sites on Facebook for these. Here are just a few of them listed, and they will be on the website as well. So those are good places to find additional information. We've talked about knowing your resources. Now let's discuss understanding your responsibilities. I hope you're convinced by now that you have many, many resources. That's not going to be the issue. So what are your responsibilities? Let's begin by understanding the purpose of all religious emblems coordinator positions. Remember that there is a council position, a district position, and a unit position. And by the way, if you want more information, then we'll talk about tonight and how those three interact. We have a webinar coming up very, very soon about how all three of those positions work together and communicate. So you're welcome to sign up for that. I just want to make a few very general statements that ultimately the purpose of all of these REC positions, first of all, is to encourage all of the young people, all the scouts, to earn the religious emblem of their faith. Most of us are convinced that the reason there are not more religious emblems earned is because the scouts simply don't know about them. So by your having the information in hand and encouraging the youth, you will help address that concern. Now, number two is extremely important. Promote religious emblems usage like BSA promotes other youth advancement. This is not simply a great idea that we're trying to sell. It is a great idea, we think, but it's more than that. It is a concept that has been endorsed by professionals in the programming area at BSA, and they believe this, and we do too, that this ought to be promoted like BSA promotes other forms of youth advancement. You can help make that possible as a religious emblems coordinator. And then also, to establish goals and track the number of religious emblems to be completed every year. I think it's perfectly obvious that if you're a unit religious emblems coordinator, you are a key player in helping establish district and council goals. So they do all work together. And then don't forget why we're doing this. Four quick things. Involvement in religious emblems makes a positive difference in the lives of scouts and their families. If there were no other reason than that one alone, that would be worth it. But also, religious emblems reinforce scouting values. I'm sure you're probably aware that if you ask the average parent why they involve their youth in scouting, they would say for values. Kids are involved for fun, and we want it to be fun. But we also reinforce scouting values with the Religious Emblems program. And we, in the process, improve relationships with our chartered partners who are faith-based, and we establish relationships with the potential religious chartered partners. That's not our goal for all of the scout units to be faith-based, but when you recognize that 70% of them are, this is a very powerful alliance that we should be strengthening as we work together for the betterment of youth. Okay, those are general responsibilities. We're not going to go through the district and the council. As I mentioned earlier, if you want to know about those, they're available in a variety of places, including the video that I mentioned. But let's talk about responsibilities, specific responsibilities of the unit religious emblems coordinator. First of all, this person serves as a member of the unit committee, a regular member of the committee. And as you see, to participate regularly in committee meetings, this is not an annual emphasis. This is an ongoing emphasis. This is a part of becoming a very fiber of the organization. The exciting thing about this is that even an individual who has very little background in scouting but wants to help can do this job, because you don't have to understand all the intricacies of advancement and all the right terms. You'll learn that in time, but it's more important to be an important part of that committee and keep the religious emblems program before the committee, as well as also keeping before them the completion rates. You'll see them soar if that happens, and I could give you many stories to prove that. And then another area that I feel like is missed a lot of the time is to encourage the nomination of adults for religious recognitions offered by many, if not most, of the faith groups. There are so many people out there who have served faithfully through their faith-based organization and scouting for many, many years. They didn't do it to get recognition, but wouldn't it be nice to acknowledge their involvement in their faith group as well as in scouting with one of the adult religious recognitions? So that's part of your work on the unit committee. Secondly, though, to acquaint all the youth with the Religious Emblems Program and the emblems available from their faith group. One of the reasons we showed the charts and all those resources beforehand is by now you should feel comfortable that you have enough, if not even more than you'd ever need, information on how to find out about religious emblems. But here, how do you help the young people and the parents, the leaders, everyone, to keep that uppermost in their mind without just being overpowering or like a broken record, as they used to say? Well, there are many ways to do this. I would suggest using exhibits and posters and progress charts, because sometimes just a silent reminder in key places will keep the religious emblems on the minds of the scouts and their leaders. And then to provide that faith-specific information on available religious emblems. You may even find out about an opportunity somewhere where young people of a particular faith could get that emblem, and you can be that catalyst to help that happen. But also to work with the unit leadership to plan presentations, just simple reminders at PAC meetings, at troop meetings, courts of honor, blue and gold banquets, all of those kinds of things. So that's an important part of acquainting the youth. Then a third responsibility is to provide the scouts and the clergy with an orientation to the program. That's easy. We've already told you through the resources that there are complete PowerPoint presentations, there are handouts, there are many things like that. And simply by getting your hands on the chart with the emblems and putting those in the hands of the families, that alone would make a huge difference in the number of religious emblems completed. And since we know that that's for a much higher reason, not simply just completing another check on the page, that ought to give us additional impetus to want to do this. So plan some presentations several times a year. And if the unit is affiliated with a faith-based organization, meet with the clergy and provide them with counselor materials. Once they find out what a blessing this can be to them, they'll want to be involved. A fourth responsibility is to encourage all the youth in the unit to earn the religious emblem of their faith. That's bottom line. That's what we've been talking about. So knowing about those emblems and then seeing the youth earn them, they will increase. As they see other young people complete the recognitions, they will want them. I sometimes jokingly say, now I understand that most young people don't want to get involved in a religious emblems program for the deep theological truths that they'll discover, and I make no light of that, but I'm simply saying kids primarily want the emblems. But in the process of pursuing the emblems, they learn a lot of important things about themselves, about their families, and about their faith. And as they see others complete them, they'll certainly want to do that. Another role of the REC at the unit level is disseminate information to everyone about possible events upcoming. I mentioned the Duty to God encampment. We'll have a webinar on that. There are retreats, there are camps, there are classes the congregations may be offering. So you can become an important source of information there. That's one of the areas where interacting with the district and council religious emblems coordinator will become very valuable. So that's a subject for another webinar. But keep that communication line open with those folks. Watch for announcements by faith groups, and use email, website, unit meetings, all those things to raise awareness of religious emblems. Use the tools at your disposal, in other words. And then a sixth responsibility is to promote religious emblems usage like BSA promotes other youth advancement. That should sound familiar because we mentioned that earlier, that particular goal for all religious emblems coordinators at whatever level. But make sure you include religious emblems presentations at places where normally people would be getting advancement, such as the Court of Honor or the PAC meeting or the Blue and Gold Banquet, as well as the House of Worship. and set up displays at events attended by parents. Parents need reminding with all the many things we've got to keep up with. So do that. And then number 7, coordinate the establishment of goals and track the number of goals completed as you move along in that process. Track them on some sort of progress toward goal poster or display board, and share those goals and results with the district REC. And finally, serve as the unit's liaison to your district religious emblems coordinator. You're really an important part of that process. You are a team member. For instance, one of the things that some faith groups, we've discovered how to get the materials or the reports on emblems completed, and others we're still working on that. You might be, as a unit religious emblems coordinator, the catalyst, the contact, the person that knows how to get that information on a regular basis from a particular faith group. So it is a team process. So stay in touch with that district religious emblems coordinator, meet and discuss. I wanted to point out to you, I'm not going to read this to you. It will be available, as I said, on the webinar replay if you'd like, or on the website. But I want to say a word about the unit chaplain and the unit religious emblems coordinator. And notice what I said at the top, we need both. There are specific responsibilities for each of these. In some faith groups, for instance, the troop chaplain is a person that is specifically clergy and only clergy. They actually, in the advancement guide, it says that ordained clergy fill this position, but some denominations don't use that process for preparing their clergy. But anyway, a person that is recognized as the faith leader typically would be sought out to do the troop chaplaincy role. Number 5, though, says encourage scouts and adventurers to participate in the religious emblems program of their faith. If you look over to the right side to the unit religious emblems coordinator, number 4 says urge all youth in the unit to earn the religious emblems of their faith. I point this out because that is basically the same responsibility, but that is only one of 7 or 8 responsibilities, and that is the way that you can cooperate. Another thing I would like to point out is that some faith groups want the unit chaplain to be ordained clergy. Matter of fact, most of them probably would. However, the unit religious emblems coordinator can very well be a layperson, a parent, an interested individual. They do not have to be a religious leader at all. They just need to have a passion for religious emblems, of course, hopefully being a person of faith, but they do not have to be clergy. So I've been asked on occasion, oh, I guess this means this takes the place of the unit chaplain. No, it does not. But it is not the same thing. So we want to point that out. Now, could a person serve in both of these roles? Yes, they could. We're not encouraging that. We feel like both of them are pretty hefty volunteer assignments. But you have flexibility there. But I would encourage every unit to involve a parent or so as a unit religious emblems coordinator. Yes, the religious emblems coordinator, you should be prepared. You should know your resources. You should understand your responsibilities. And then finally, to develop a plan of action. Now, that plan is going to be unique to you and your group, your unit. We're not going to say this is the only way to do it because we haven't come up with that plan. Your plan is going to be the best plan for your particular unit or units. But here are some suggestions for some folks to say, well, I'd just like to have an idea of a place to start. This is a place to start we'll share with you. This is by no means the only way to do it. Here's the plan for achieving success in unit religious emblems usage. This is to be found on the P.R.A.Y.pub.org site as well. Let's use a hand for the illustration here to help us realize what are some of the things we can do to achieve this recognition. If I can. All right, here we go. The first of these fingers on this hand would be for organize. Very, very basic information. Here I'm saying enlist the unit religious emblems coordinator. Well, if you're already that, you're a long, long way down the road. But if you are in a position, work with your committee to do the kinds of things we've talked about. serve as a key leader for educating and involving scouts and parents and clergy. So organize, that's a really big part of the process. Then secondly, strategize. Set those religious emblems completion goals for the unit at times of the year that make the most sense, at times when you can recognize the scouts completing that. We mentioned that Scout Sunday or Scout Sabbath in February is a great time. There's not a bad time. Some may just be more logical than others, but set those goals in a timely way to meet them, and to discover and support the existing opportunities as well, like the Duty to God encampment. If you were living in the Atlanta Area Council, this would have been a great way to encourage youth to get out there, get involved, and begin the process. And then they come back ready to complete their religious emblems. Encourage classes. Help clergy understand what a tremendous enrichment this can be for them. And then, as I've said, recognize there are certain seasons that may make more sense than others, but any time is a good time. So organize, strategize, and then mobilize. Equip and energize the unit religious emblems coordinator with local training as well as online sites such as praypub.org/REC, and that much longer one at scouting.org, which you found on the site too. But encourage the unit religious emblems coordinator to interact with others that are serving in that capacity. Not all of the training, not all of the ideas, not all of the plans have been devised. You are a pioneer. Remember that wagon at the early part of the presentation? We really believe you are that. So you have some of the answers, and we want to hear from you. Involve your scouts, your chaplain aides, and other scouts, and the chaplains, and the parents, and the clergy all together. Mobilize, and then really important part of the process, visualize. Use creative tools that will help chart progress. Now these don't have to be difficult things. For instance, you could make a replica of just a generic religious emblem, and as you made progress toward 100% or whatever the goal is, you could keep filling the red area or whatever color you decide till you progress to the top of that emblem to denote your reaching the goal. But there are all kinds of measurement devices that maybe would make more sense to you, or that you'd find easier to use, or more graphic, like a thermometer with a wide piece of ribbon you can pull it, slide up as you progress toward the goal. Or certainly everybody can relate in one way or the other to a gas gauge, and starting with empty and get all the way to overfilled, hopefully. Stopwatches, graphs, charts, whatever helps you to illustrate the achievement toward the goal. And finally, on the hand there, advertise. Every available tool. Don't miss unit newsletters, our unit and charter organization websites, congregational mailouts, orders of worship on the weekend, courts of honor, banquets, special events. And then if you're fortunate enough to be in a community where you can access print and electronic media, by all means use those as well. So publicize religious emblems completions in the Scout units, as well as in the congregations. For some, that may be a new concept, but that really is huge. Now, I've done a lot of talking, and I realize that, and we've covered a lot of ground in what seemed to me to be a few minutes. It may have seemed like a lot of minutes to you, but I'm going to draw a breath, and I'm going to let Deb come in and read some questions. I'll attempt to answer, but I do have to admit I did read ahead, Deb, on one of them, and Luann said, go ahead and admit it, we all love patches. I do admit that, so confession is good for the soul.
Yeah. Yes, there are several questions, Chip, but before I start reading some questions, there were several people who are wanting to know about the PowerPoint slides themselves. So, you know what, we are posting two things online. We are going to post a recording of this presentation, so anybody can go click and listen to the presentation. We are also posting the slides themselves. So if you want to download the PowerPoint slides, you will be able to find that and use that. And we're going to have that on the Learning Center on our website. All right, Chip, we have a few questions. One of the first ones would be, how does this unit REC position affect the chaplain aide position in the troop? It seems that some of the responsibilities overlap.
Well, they could, but I think they're working hand in hand with the troop chaplain. And of course, in some troops, sadly, they may not have the chaplain. But I guess I say that because if they do, certainly you don't want to be working hand in hand with the chaplain. But I think you could be a huge resource to the chaplain aide. They can help in the setting of goals and the finding out about the religious emblems, but certainly putting in their hands materials about to give them a handle on how to do their job, I think.
All righty. Alan's asking about his council and district. They do not have a council or district REC as part of his wood badge ticket. He's going to present this program to the district. What presentation would you recommend for that type of presentation?
Well, there are several. One of the ones that we already have up has to do with promoting religious emblems or explaining religious emblems. We're going to do a webinar soon on how you lead a University of Scouting or powwow presentation. Any of these would be fine. Would say just a bit about religious emblems, why have religious emblems, and how to get them. I think the key thing is that would speak particularly to the professionals is that we know that when we have kids involved in religious emblems programs and also faith-based units, but when they're involved in religious emblems programs and so forth, that contributes to their longevity in the unit, and it contributes to the strength and longevity of the unit as well, their sustainability, and certainly professionals and volunteers are interested in that. So to be able to explain not only is this a good idea to help kids, and of course that's number one, but it does contribute to unit stability and to the kids staying longer in the unit.
That's right. Is there an age requirement to be a religious emblems coordinator?
Well, I don't think we'll take anybody over 103. No, obviously it's an adult position, but other than, being at least 18, no, there's no age requirement. Okay. I mean, certainly, if you have a young person in a unit who's a chaplain aide or something, it can be of help, but the actual REC is an adult.
Have the BSA councils been informed of the importance of the REC positions? Joe's council does not seem to know much about the REC program. How would you address that?
Okay, I understand that, Joe. That is not surprising. There are many units that know a lot about it and some that are just beginning. I would say one thing that will probably recognize the value of this more is that one of the new pieces that has come out in the last 2 years has been a piece that is targeting new units and particularly unit sustainability, keeping the units we already have, building quality units, and a huge part of that process, and the scouting staff, they are aware of that piece. It doesn't specifically, at least I hope they are, it doesn't specifically talk about religious emblems. However, it does address the idea of getting additional faith-based units as a part of the mix because of what I've said earlier about their sustainability. So all of that kind of goes together, and you might be that that glue or that connection point to help them understand that, because we have been for the last 2 years, we have attended, Mark Hazelwood, the CEO of P.R.A.Y, and I have been involved in the Top Hands Conference for the highest level scout execs in each council, and we have been premiering that idea. And I'd have to say to you that the first year, last year when we went, it was a new concept, and we had a lot of people kind of looking at us like, is this for real or not? And which is understandable. That's fair. I'd have felt the same way. This year, I would have to tell you that as we asked people about being aware of that, we didn't get those strange looks nearly as often, and most said they realized they needed to do that. So you may be coming in at just the right time to affirm that idea.
Great. Also, along those lines, let's just start on another question. If a scout has trouble getting support from his respective home church, should the REC be coordinating right from the start, or should we defer to the parents on how to proceed?
Well, I think, just as we talk about duty to God and the primary responsibility resting with the family and with the faith leader, here again, sometimes there may be a misunderstanding or a lack of appreciation for the material. So that's where, you could be of help. But of course, we do always look to the faith base and to the clergy and to the family. But it's also, there are many families that maybe they've moved, they don't really have a place to worship yet. Maybe they've just not gotten connected. So we're just asking you to be of help where you can. Your key role is to make aware what the religious emblems are and how to get them.
Floyd is asking, he's the unit chaplain. Can he serve as the unit REC?
Yes, you can. Now, I said we don't push that because there would even be some that say, well, that would be a part of the responsibility of the unit chaplain. I wouldn't disagree with that, but Floyd, you sound like the sort of guy that I already like, and that is you'd be willing to take that on. We're still challenged, to get unit chaplains in many, many of our units. And so we could go to those folks with just the basics of getting them involved and trying to add to the spiritual tone of the unit. And I think that to say, hey, let's just mix all this together and make both of them, that would overwhelm and probably make our job of enlistment of chaplains more difficult. However, there's nothing to say if you're the kind of guy that wants to do all of that and that's what your troop or unit committee decides, then sure, you can do both.
And is the unit committee responsible for appointing this position?
Yes, they are. At the council and district level, they serve on the advancement committee, which I think may be important to point out, and so they are selected by the appropriate individuals or committee to serve on the advancement. However, for the unit level, the unit committee should be looking to enlist this person because if I had a parent who came and volunteered, I'd say, sounds like we got the right person.
Right. And if they were to give a presentation, do they have permission to mention your information?
Oh, absolutely. That's what it's here for. And we're trying to put as much of that out there as possible so that make it as easy as possible. That's why we do the patch program, for instance, just so that the kids, just like they probably don't want to do deep theological study, they may not want to listen to an announcement either, but if you let them know at the beginning of it that there's going to be a patch, then they may be a whole lot more interested.
Right. How do we let the council know that we've taken this training so we can help scouts in our district and the units know that they can come to us?
Great question. I would suggest that you let either your district executive or your district chairman or someone along that line and or at the council, depending on how they are organized. Also, you may suggest that the councils have a religious relationships committee. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It is not our suggestion that this person serve on that committee. I mean, we would prohibit it, but they have their own assignment, but they ought to be thrilled to know about that. So I would say all of the above and let everybody know, because that will generate more questions and hopefully will generate more RECs.
Great. Floyd was asking, he started a religious emblem program last month, and how often should they meet to be done by Scouts Sunday? I don't know what program they're doing.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge part of it. I know that I was asked to do a God in Church program and be counselor for that, and for middle school age kids and Protestant independent churches. And we actually, there are 7 lessons in that, and then of course an introductory time and then a closing time. So we actually were meeting about 9 weeks plus some assignments between time, because we really weren't, they didn't set as much time aside as we really should have. We had about an hour or so every time. So yeah, there is still time, but there's no time to waste, I would say, and most of those. Now some of them are more involved than others, but I suspect that most of them could be completed by Scout Sunday still, yeah.
We have a committee with the Diocese on Religious Emblems that has in the past coordinated the religious emblem programs for Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts of their faith. Is there a recommended approach to working them together?
Like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, is that the question? Or?
Yeah, I'm thinking is it the Catholic program for Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts? It says the religious emblems program of their faith. I know that with the Catholic program, if this is with the diocese, Girl Scouts have a separate program.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, so that's very important to know that. We mentioned early on, and it might have been lost in the translation because there's a lot of material, but every emblem is different, and Deb knows quite a bit about that. And I know even the making available of a religious emblems coordinator did meet an interest and an enthusiasm level for some of the Catholics on one of our programs because they felt, well, we had kind of a missing part there to address some of the emblems for Cub Scouts. So I don't really have enough information to totally answer that. But.
Right. You know what? I think there are many dioceses very active, and a lot of times when they're promoting their own program, they end up, promoting programs of other faiths, and I know some do cooperate with Girl Scouts. So there are ways that you can work together, but it is difficult with all the different faith groups and different Boy Scout and Girl Scout programs. So. There's another question. Can an adult earn more than one mentor award, such as for different levels?
Well, you would know the answer to that better than me.
And,
I mean, I would say yes if you laid the different levels, but what would you say?
And I think the thing that we want to point out, though, if this is the P.R.A.Y mentor program, that parents can receive the mentor pin, but the mentor program that comes from P.R.A.Y does not qualify an adult for that adult religious square knot. To make the distinction between the mentor pin and like an adult award that requires like 5 years of service, and then you get the square knot for those adult awards. But for the mentor program, yeah, you can be a God and Me mentor or a God and Family mentor, and you get those pins, but those do not get you the square knot for the adult.
Thank you, because that is so important. There's a misunderstanding on that sometimes. And also the adult recognitions do vary widely. There are a few that, at least one that I'm aware of, where the adult really does complete a list of requirements. And most of the times it's through a nomination and recognition process.
Here's a question from someone in St. Louis. About half of our districts in the Greater St. Louis Area Council have district RECs, but many units do not know about it. I'm a seminarian for the Archdiocese and an intern for our Office of Catholic Scouting. As an internal member who has the ability to spread the word to our parishes, can you give me any advice?
Go. No, that's wonderful, because
I like it.
Don't be discouraged. Yeah, I do too. Don't feel like, why doesn't everybody know about that? I mean, truthfully, the Religious Relationships Committee, the National Religious Relationships Committee, just met a few days ago when we kind of officially said, hey, this is on, and the scouting professionals who have a electronic communique called ScoutWire, it was just on there a couple of weeks ago. So we've been thinking about this for so long. We think it's been around forever, but in truth, it is brand new. So you're really not behind the curve if you don't have that yet.
Once we complete this webinar, are we considered an REC for the unit?
As much as we have the right to do that, we do. Of course, obviously, you have to be appointed by somebody, but we feel like you've had the training, if that's the question.
Right, and Tony's saying, I may have missed this, but is the Unit Religious Emblems Coordinator a registered position in BSA?
That is a very good question. At this point, you would be a registered member. You would register as a member of the committee. The Boy Scouts nationally are going through kind of a database change, and we hope and have some encouragement to think that at some point we'll be able to, however they call the registration, that you would have a code for this position, so that if we could disseminate information across the country and so forth, we'd have that code. So right now you would register as a member of the committee.
And I think maybe we have time for one more question. Is BSA going to add religious emblems to the new leader training? To new leader training, I'm sorry.
I don't know to answer the question. I mean, we've been working with the commissioners recently. I had actually talked to someone today about that. Every way we can, we're trying to get that information out. And I would have to say, at every one of those, there's been enthusiasm and receptivity. So you should be encouraged by that if you're interested in promoting religious emblems. Well, Deb, have we run out of time
I
here?
think we have run out of time. We covered a lot of ground tonight, Chip.
We really have. Well, let me just remind you that one place that you can get a start is to go to PRAYPub.org and the Learning Center. I point this out in particular because this is where you will find the recorded versions of this and awesome printed materials. And I would just like to thank you for participating and wish you the very best as you make a difference in the lives of parents and young people and units. You're doing something really great, and thank you for doing it. And good night.
Good night, everybody.